Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the July 15, 2015 meeting of the Board of Adjustment of the Municipality of Anchorage. I'm Baron Creakshaw, the chair. Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Baron Kucho,
Here.
John Haxby,
Here.
Dwayne Adams,
Here.
Robert Stewart.
Here.
Also present is Julia Tucker, Board Counsel, and Courtney Kitchen, Board Counsel, Lisa Slisner, Municipal Staff Support, and we have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. It appears we have a full house for the first time ever. The first item on the agenda for your consideration is to quickly look at the agenda here. Would you please review to the extent you haven't done that? For approval as presented. Okay. Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Any argument, any discussion?
None.
Seeing none, any opposition? None. Approved, 3 to none. The next item on the agenda is the minutes of the previous meeting of July the 9th, last week. And what you had received before is the draft of minutes that required a couple changes. And just to let you know what those changes were, if you look at page 2, item number 2, board reconsideration, the motion was listed twice. The same motion was listed twice, and that appears to be error. If you look at the new set of minutes that Lisa kindly prepared, if you also look on page 2 of that, under item number 2, board consideration, you will find that there are 2 different motions listed under item number 2, board consideration. So that's one change from the old set of minutes. And then on page 4, under item 6A, there was, in the first line, it should have read AMC 2145, 265A 16C. The A was left off, that has been added. And on page 5, under item E, last line, there should have been a period after the numeral 14. So that was added, and those are the only changes from the previous version that you have had since last night. I don't have any other changes, but perhaps other board members do.
Just a question, you said
Yeah.
last night, did we receive these last night?
I sent out a reminder last night, and it had the agenda and a,
We didn't get that.
okay.
Really? So you've never seen the proposed minutes before?
Okay.
Oh, really? Well, then I would suggest you take a minute and review them right now.
Yeah, I would.
Sure. And in the meantime, are there other suggestions? Mr. Stewart?
I just have one. That same omission of the A is, if you go 6A where we included that A after 265A.16.C,
Yeah.
go straight up, and you'll see another quote on the 265, should be an A in there.
Oh, on, yeah, You are absolutely correct.
That's the only thing.
Lisa, do you know where,
Yes.
what Mrs. Stewart is referring to? Okay,
Mhm.
I'm sorry, we overlooked that. Okay. Anything else, Mrs. Stewart?
None.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Mr. Haxby, any additions, changes, deletions?
You're still on your first one, aren't you, or are we on ours?
No, we are on the set of minutes of the previous meeting.
I thought it was for your July 9th, ours as well. I've read it.
Correct. You were there as well.
For the second part of it. Remember that,
Okay.
So-
that July
so
9th
that
was a
extends-
two-part
To
meeting.
that extent, I have no change.
Okay, all right. Then it comes down to Mr. Adams.
We have briefly reviewed and I have no changes.
Subject to those changes then, any further discussions, additions, deletions, changes? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. Zipping right along to our next item on the agenda, we come to 5A, and that is approval and adoption of the revised findings and decisions of the Board of Adjustment, Board's reconsideration of appeal number 2014-5. And the record should reflect that Mr. Haxby is not participating in that one. No, Mr. Adams is not participating.
No,
No.
Mr. Haxby.
Mr. Haxby is not participating in that one, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to confuse things. All right, you have had in front of you or received a proposed findings, conclusions, and decisions on the motion for reconsideration, and that's what I want to address first. Have we all had an opportunity to review that?
Yes.
Any questions, suggestions, changes, Mr. Adams?
I have a few things to, but on page 3,
All right.
at the top says issues decided by the Board of Adjustment, that slides to the top of issues. It could be that I'm looking at an old copy or something. So does it look like this? And it says issues decided at the very top, the heading. And the heading, I believe, goes before the issues, which the first being issue number 1. Wouldn't it be? Because 5 is supporting
Conclusions. Well,
preliminary matters.
we should just, use Tucker. Can we just strike that?
My sense is 1 through 5 pertain to preliminary matters.
Yeah,
And then
you're
issues
absolutely
decided
right.
order. The first one is the issue number 1.
Yeah, and so my initial thinking is that we simply move it off.
Yeah, or
What
just
is
move
your,
down. Just move down 1 sentence.
I guess I'm not understanding what is,
So
so
I-
far I've heard that number 5, I understand that the chair has indicated that it could be stricken. And then, Mr. Adams, I understand that you think that it's out of place, but I'm not sure if you think that it should go below issue 1 or if it should go above issues decided by the Board of Adjustment. It's simply a transitional, sentence, and
Oh, it's
so.
that- Okay, if that's the intent, okay.
And so I don't know, I'm fine to strike it if that's the, if it's confusing.
Yeah, the way I read that, and I see if it's an introductory sentence, that's fine.
oh, I see, because,
The preliminary matters, as a preliminary matter, the Board of
Yes.
Adjustment determined its
So
music
it's-
history identified. I thought it was just yet another
Do you think that it should be stricken?
It's fine, with that understanding, I'm okay with it.
Well, I wouldn't want anybody else to be confused by that. I mean, you sat there, I mean, a transitional sentence provides clarity, or we don't have it, so.
It's fine, why don't I just withdraw my comment and simplify it?
Mr. Stewart, is it confusing to you?
No.
Good.
It's good.
Withdrawn, I understand.
Withdrawn.
Okay. Next item, Mr. Adams.
Just a question, there was we had a lot of discussion about what was a waiver and what was not a waiver, and ours talks about waiver all the time. It talks about a lot, not in our findings as well as in our resolution. And so, nowhere in Title 21 does it require a waiver. So that's language that we've inserted, that we are providing a waiver of this, but it doesn't require a waiver, it just sits in judgment for the reduction, elimination or reduction. So, with sensitivity relative to the word waiver, should it just say reduction? Or is waiver something fine as it is? And it is only because there was a lot of discussion in the minutes, if you remember, between staff and the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission and some members about whether they were granting a waiver and how the waiver, who's the waiver belonged to. And there was discussion that, well, no, we aren't providing a waiver. And so that's the only reason I bring it up, is it would seem to be something that got bandied about and was a little confusing to the commission, and whether waiver is the proper word. And I'm fine with it, I'd only bring it up legally, and I think it's a legal issue, not a substantive issue. Whether when we say waiver, it's clear that we're granting a waiver, and that is the same as reduction or elimination of that distance.
So what you're saying, for example, on.
In page 5.
Well, it comes beforehand.
Yeah, it's.
If you simply go to issue number 3 on page 4, it talks both about the reduction and waiver. And so what you're suggesting is that we strike the word "and waive" and simply say to approve reduction of the minimum separations.
Correct.
Separation distance and the 200% fall zone.
Correct.
That's a good point. Ms. Tucker, what's your thought?
Well, I'm thinking that the first time that I've seen it so far is there on page 4, even in the beginning, very top of the page. It's in both the paragraphs above it, issue 3.
Mhm.
And what I understood, that the conditional use language is, it talks about approving the reduction of the minimum separation distance. But what the administrative way to do that is to provide that a little bit differently in different wording. And what was talked about was that 200% fall zone. And so I had thought that the board's determination and discussion was that if you go the administrative route and you meet all the supplemental regulations, and you're not too tall, then you accomplish everything that's included in the conditional use by getting an administrative waiver. And at the code for the supplemental conditions, supplemental regulations, administrative route, and the conditional use route both refer back to each other, and they say all these conditions apply to each. If you're in administrative, then these other ones apply.
Waive or reduce the burden. So waive is in there. I
Yeah.
had not read that.
And also I thought that what the board thought that was important to give instruction to, in talking about their opinion, that when a project, when a site plan doesn't meet all the regulations and then has to go the conditional use route, that's where that's taken care of, totally. That is, that you don't have to go and get, conditional use and go back and get the waiver. So it seemed important to link them and to say, okay, when you're reducing it, you are waiving, hello.
And I have not seen the word waive, and I put most of my attention into 2145's A16C, which says that he may reduce or eliminate it. And I thought, well, we should be parallel to that, but I do see in 280 C that specifically does say may waive or reduce. So the legal word is there, so I'm fine with that.
Okay.
But it was the confusion in there that the commission there brought that to my attention. But as long as, when we say waive, we aren't creating a new term, because the it doesn't say that he waives it, nor does it say that you have to apply for a waiver. That's part of the confusion, this whole very badly written code, is if you want it, how do you get it? Do you apply for it, you write a letter, or there's no process? So I'm good. So the second time, Mr. Sachs is down.
All right, so I take it, just to follow up, Mr. Adams, you are waiving that
Yeah,
concern?
waiving that.
Mr. Stewart, do you have anything to add to that,
Not to that discussion.
discussion?
Not to
Okay.
that.
Then we go back to Mr. Adams, because I think he has more items. I see his red pen there on several paragraphs.
Interestingly enough, Cyril Lee said good.
Oh, go ahead.
And, the last thing, that I have on page 9 is at the bottom. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be a bad idea, referencing the specific language of the municipal attorney in the very last sentence on that page. This is corrected via reconsideration by the Board of Adjustment. Rehearing is unnecessary. It's basically saying we did he says reconsider and rehear. So we did reconsider, but we're not going to rehear it. And it goes directly to his language that says that the board should reconsider its decision or rehear the case if necessary. And I'm just wondering to tie it directly to the language, whether it's a good practice legally to say, we did reconsider it, but we're not going to rehear it. And in our consideration are these things.
So you want to add what specifically?
So this is corrected via reconsideration by the Board of Adjustment, semicolon, rehearing is unnecessary. Does it help to tie it to specifically what he requested? So that we say, thank you, we'll reconsider, but we're not going to rehear it.
Ms. Tucker, what's your thought?
Well, my thought is that if you don't have to add words, then you don't. And so, I don't know that.
Doesn't add.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that makes the opinion any, makes the decision portion any, clearer or stronger. I don't have any particular
It doesn't make it
thing
stronger,
to
then that's
identify,
fine.
but I don't think it makes it stronger.
Okay, and that's fine. I do have one.
Well, just a second, so you're withdrawing that one?
Sure, I'll withdraw
Okay,
that
well,
one.
before you do, Mr. Stewart, do you have any comments regarding that?
No, I really don't have any problem with that, because it's going back to our original decision, not the reconsideration decision. The reconsideration, we're clarifying.
Yes, yes, I agree with that. So, in the light of that,
I'll withdraw that. I do have
Okay.
one question just for discussion, is the Planning and Zoning Commission typically makes findings of fact, and in a case where they impose conditions of approval, the findings of fact are quite lengthy usually. You know, we find that, out of these 8 things, they would probably go down each one and enumerate how it complies with that to provide this case, because the second issue did not pass, they really didn't do that in their motion. And we get into the changes to their motion. But my question is, the only real reference, we have now, if we go to page 5, item number 33, that we're inserting, the board adjustment determines substitutes independent judgments that of planning and zoning commission for disputed issues and findings under C3D. The board adjustment finds goals of land use regulations of cell towers are better served by waiving and reducing the burden of the applicant with respect, blah, blah, blah. And we talked about the fall zone. Now, neither the planning and zoning commission now, nor we have enumerated the compliance with this, our simple statement is, finds that goals of land use regulation are better served. But we don't have anything that says that the height of the tower relative to the thing, the neighborhood is acceptable because of this, that the proximity to residential structures is considered because we find this. The nature of uses on adjacent, there's nothing that enumerates that. If the planning and zoning commission had done something, I would look for that if we were really basing our decision on the findings of fact and enumerate those. Do we have an obligation to do that since we are substituting our judgment for theirs in this case, and they did not enumerate that on the conditional use?
Are you suggesting that we should add to the amended and incorporated into the final decision, the decision of the planning and zoning commission?
No, what he's saying, what I
That we-
understand that he's saying is that, and I think that wouldn't hurt. I think that what he is saying that because the planning and zoning commission did not make specific findings to reduce the separation distance, and the Board of Adjustment is stepping in and exercising its independent judgment, would it be appropriate and in fact more complete on the Board of Adjustment's part to go ahead and make the type of findings that Mr. Adams is familiar with, that's specific, instead of just making a conclusion that it does? Is it better to say, to go through the criteria, since you don't really have that in the planning and zoning's decision? Is that what I understand
That
you
is
saying?
correct, and so I'm not sure whether, I think it belongs in the planning and zoning commission findings, but I don't know if that would go into our findings, conclusions, and decisions as well.
I think it would.
That's why I bring it up now.
Okay, so, let's think about that.
But what you would suggest is that we supplement the decision of the planning and zoning commission.
With an assessment of the 8 factors in 280C.
Right, and I think that, let's see, so then, I think that,
Wait a minute. Look at finding of fact number 2. Of the planning and zoning commission decision that we have amended, where we added the request meets the general standards for conditional use approval, AMC 2150-020, comma, the conditional use standards for towers, AMC 2150-280C, and the supplemental district regulations, 2145-265.
Right, and so that's there, and so my question is that sufficient? It says that it meets it, is that sufficient to the Superior Court to demonstrate that we consider these factors, or do we need to add more? Just simply because, again, if I were on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I would have gone down every single one of these just based basically buffer our stance on appeal. And had they done that, I would add, and they had dealt with in the conditional use this height issue, it all would have been out on the table, which they did not do. So, anyway.
Mr. Stewart, any comment?
Is that, what do you guys think?
I didn't, this is under the old code, right?
Correct.
I didn't bring my old code with me, but I do recall that there's 8.
There are 8 standards, that's
Yeah.
correct. But I must tell you, okay, so you're going to look at it while you do that. My thoughts are, we frequently see from planning and zoning, decisions where they simply say, we have reviewed and this request meets the general standards of whatever it is. And the 8 standards that you're referring to are
They're
contained in one of these, yeah. And they are in one of these code sections that are quoted there in paragraph 2.
Okay, and so is that sufficient? I'm not arguing that they are or they aren't, I just wanted it as a general discussion.
Well, I was thinking that you were suggesting that the Board of Adjustment, perhaps under your leadership on this, would, because of your familiarity, would actually have findings. Like the
Relative to
example that
those
you
8
gave,
standards.
relative to those 8 standards. So instead of a conclusion that said, we find that it meets it, would then drill down as, in your experience, not with this decision, but in others, sometimes the ones that don't make it to the Board of Adjustment for appeal, there will be a detailed finding to say how it was that you determined that it met that standard.
Right, and that's, that's the way, when I was on the commission, we typically, under the leadership of that, Richard, that's the way we always did it, to nail down why we made that decision, so that there was no question on appeal that we had considered each of those things. But if, in a court of law, if that's
In a
sufficient,
court
I
of
don't
law,
have
that
any
makes
problem.
it much stronger when you do that. And that's why you do it at the planning and zoning level.
But I must tell you, my reaction is, I have seen numerous decisions of P&Z that simply makes that conclusory
Oh, I would
statement,
agree.
and that's where this came from.
Right, but what he's saying, what Mr. Adams is saying, yes, but this board is stepping in and exercising its independent judgment on issues of fact, not just conclusions of law. And so on issues of
That's the
fact,
distinction.
does it make the record stronger for this board to make these individual findings? And yes, that would. I mean, that's my legal answer. I understand what Chair Guchow is saying, because many times the ones that make it here don't. But that doesn't mean
Okay.
that they shouldn't
That's a
have.
good practice, in other words.
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this then, Mr. Adams, have you proposed, or can you propose language that addresses all 8 standards?
Sure, I can do that. We could do that one of 2 ways, and after I decided to raise this issue, when I first thought about it, I probably should have brought the draft, I did not do that, but what we could do, it appears your next item could be relatively short, since it was a rather short meeting, simple conclusions, is I could step over there, draft some, we could come back and then consider.
So you'd wanna adjourn this discussion, you and I, cause I'm not involved in the next one either, could go upstairs to my office.
Yeah, or sit there or whatever.
Well, at least I'd have a typewriter upstairs, a computer.
That would be good.
And the code, and then, let, the next item, come up,
Sure.
and then we would come back down.
Okay.
If we're in agreement, I think Bob ought to weigh in with this.
Mr. Stewart?
This talks in terms of the general standards for conditional use, and then it says, planning and zoning shall consider the following factors. Whether to issue a conditional use permit, and they can waive one or more of them. When they conclude the goals of ordinance are better served thereby, and that's the language that we've already got in there. It seems to me when you look at, it requires the planning and zoning commission to consider them, not make a finding on them.
Right.
So in my view, we're saying that they considered all of these 8, and some may have been very cursory. When you look at the surrounding topography, and you look at, proposed ingress and egress, you know, those were almost given by the very nature of where that pole was sitting. So some of these things were just cursorily looked at, and some were looked at in more detail. But I'm confident that the record, from the planning and zoning, they did address all of those kinds of things.
Okay, in light of the fact that we are substituting, they did, in the light that we're substituting, I mean, we're.
Remember, we
we're-
have 2 prongs.
Right.
One by operation of law, what they did, the other by this board stepping in and exercising its independent judgment based on that record. And what Mr. Adams is saying is that it might be helpful to have this board go ahead and abstract from the record the actual things that this board is doing on that independent exercise of
The
judgment.
record and the transcript.
Yeah.
Let me suggest the following, that we first go to the other, any other changes that are required and try to dispose of those. And then we will recess this, and Mr. Adams and Ms. Tucker will go upstairs to her office and come up with something, and then we'll come back. And we, in the meantime, go to the next case. That gives us an opportunity to look in detail at what
Okay.
Mr. Adams is
Because
suggesting.
we may or may not find that it's
Exactly.
appropriate.
Exactly. Is that acceptable?
Yes.
Okay, then we will do it that way. Then, Mr. Adams, do you have any
That's
other
it.
changes?
That's all I have.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Mr. Stewart, do you have any changes, additions, deletions?
I think there was just one that we,
Now, remember, we are now looking at the findings, conclusions, and decision on the motion for reconsideration.
Right.
First, okay?
Yep. That's it.
That's it?
Wait a minute. Conclusions. Okay, just, one change on conclusion 6B. You need to put that A back in.
What page are you looking at?
7.
You are correct. On the B, it should be 2145, 265, A 16C. A period. Thank you. You're always a stickler for these things. I love it.
Good catch.
That's
Yeah.
it.
Very good catch. Anything else there?
No.
Okay. We should also consider the addition that Ms. Tucker has suggested, the addition to paragraph 31. And that is adding the following sentence: irrespective of the planning and zoning commission's actions and inactions, the Board of Adjustment may decide this case independently on the record before the board, period. Remand is neither required under AMC 2130-100, nor necessary to final disposition of the matter on appeal by the Board of Adjustment. That would be an additional sentence in paragraph 31. And that would both on the motion for reconsideration, and it would also, of course, move forward to the amendment and the stated findings, conclusions, and decisions.
I like the addition of the word irrespective, because that puts it into that dichotomy that we were looking at.
Okay, so that's agreeable with you?
Yes.
Mr. Adams? Okay, I agree as well. Okay, any other changes, additions, deletions to the findings, conclusions, and decision on the motion for reconsideration? Seeing none, that is ready for further discussion once Mr. Adams and Ms. Tucker come back. Then we have the amended and restated findings, conclusions, and decision. And that should, of course, track the changes that we have made and perhaps still want to make to those. It should track the findings, conclusions, and decisions on motion for reconsideration. Other than, subject to that, are there any additional changes to the amended and restated findings, conclusions, and decision? Anything else? Mr. Stewart?
No, that case.
Okay, good. Then we will simply recess this matter. It will be then, as I understand the status of the matter to be, that we are not making a final decision on those two documents, but are awaiting proposed changes by Mr. Adams and Ms. Tucker, which we will hopefully hear as soon as we have heard the second matter, the old business. Okay? So much for that, and the two of you can leave, as it is no longer necessary to have you here. And the record should reflect that Mr. Adams and Ms. Tucker are leaving, and
Hard to get. Here's your
Yes.
original copy of that, which I
Thank you,
scanned to
thank
you.
And Ms. Kitchen is appearing as
Noticing.
counsel for the board on appeal number 2015-1, and Mr. Haxby is participating in the decision of Board of Adjustment Appeal number 2015-1.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Do you have
Mr.
an extra
Haxby.
copy? I was out of town.
You can have my copy. I have mine, I'll just put it on my computer. Computer.
So, I'm not sure I have a revised version of that. Did you send me a revised version?
I did, I sent one.
did?
Did you get it? I sent it yesterday.
No,
I
no,
got
no.
I got the one with the draft, 100 pages.
Mm-hmm.
I think I printed this off yesterday, yeah. But I reviewed it last
Oh,
night.
did not see that. I'm so sorry. So anyway, I think we can deal with it, not to worry. We have a draft before us. I'm looking at a previous draft, and just to lead this off, what I had suggested to our esteemed council is that the second whereas clause on page 1 of 9 have the words, "at a meeting open to the public," added on the second whereas and prior to the date that's listed there. Do you see that on the revised version?
Okay, that's, but we've already covered that just before now, therefore it being resolved.
Yes, right before that.
Yeah.
It's in there? Okay, good.
Decided to appeal at a meeting open to the public on July 9th.
Okay. On page 3, following the word moreover, there should be a comma. Is that in there?
Yes.
You got that?
Yep.
Okay. Going back to page 2, numeral 1 should be struck before findings and conclusions, and following that, it should say capital A, period, the proposed sports facility, et cetera, et cetera. Do you see that? What's that changed?
It shows up as A, yes.
Good. All right. Next, on page 3, before the heading of substantial supports, et cetera, it should say capital P.
Says,
Yep.
Good. On page 5, on top, it should say capital C, municipality of Anchorage employees did not prejudice,
Mhm.
not prejudiced.
that needs to be changed.
Okay, so there's a typo and that should be corrected. Did not prejudice. Make a note of that?
Yes.
Okay. On page 6, it should say capital D, substantial evidence supports, et cetera, et cetera. Good. On page 7, it should say capital E, substantial evidence supports, et cetera, et cetera. On number 32, following the word rather, there should be a comma.
We'll say that again.
Following the word rather in paragraph 32.
What's there?
Okay, good. And in paragraph 33, the sentence should end with the word traffic.
Yes.
Okay. Following page, number 8, paragraph 35, following the words concerns in the footnote 23, it should say, and the Planning and Zoning Commission agreed with that determination, period, and then there should be a footnote.
Does
And what's the footnote?
23.
Okay, so in other words. you
Yeah,
combine
I
footnote.
added, it had previously 44 through 45.
Yeah.
185 through 186, and then I added 204 to 207. And that addresses the Planning and Zoning Commission's.
4207,
Mhm.
okay. All right, so if you look on the bottom at footnote 23, it should refer to transcript pages 44 to 45, 185 to 86, and 204 to 207.
Does.
All right, and those are the changes that I suggested. Mr. Stewart, do you have any additional changes?
I'm gonna hit the easy one first. On page 5, you go down to 24.
Okay.
That again should be prejudice rather than prejudice.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Love the detail.
Okay. Next, Mr. Stewart?
Saving a question for the page 2. Let's go to page 1.
Okay.
And if you look at what the 3 individuals asked, they were requesting this is in the 1, 2, and 3, 4th whereas,
Yeah.
that the 3 individuals asked that the Board of Adjustment vacate the commission resolution and require the school district to complete a public facility site selection process. Would that be, to make those changes there, would that be a better way of saying it?
Kitchen?
I'm okay with either, if that sounds better to you, so say,
I'm just looking at requesting the Board of Adjustment, 1, vacate, 2, and require, and then a site selection process. I think the addition of public facility site selection process keys it right to the current code provision.
so can you tell me again, requesting the Board of Adjustment vacate Commission Resolution number 2015-001
And require,
and require.
in other words, they're saying Board of Adjustment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Vacate, require, ASD to complete a public facility site selection process.
Site selection process,
Does
okay.
that make sense?
Facility.
I'm only, my one concern is public facility. I don't have my code book in front of me, but there is a distinction between public facility and, it's in the, and sports. the sports center.
2103140 is public facility site selection.
Okay, that's the title of it?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect, then I will include
And then
that.
it lists public schools and further on down, and sports centers.
So,
Okay, great.
so would you make a statutory reference there? A public facility site selection process under AMC 21, what is it, 40?
03.
03.
140.
.140.
Yeah, that would even be better clarification.
Did they request it under that statute?
They did, I can double
That's
check,
what
but.
the three
Yes,
request.
that's what they requested.
It was under that statute.
Right.
Mhm.
Under
So
that ordinance, yeah.
Under that ordinance, okay,
Yes.
so.
There is no other ordinance.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that.
Yeah.
That that's, if it's mentioned in the ordinance, then yeah, that's nailed it. That's a good idea.
Okay.
Okay, so now it says, requesting the Board of Adjustment vacate Commission Resolution number 2015-001, comma, require the Anchorage School District to complete a public facility site selection process under AMC 21.03.140, comma, and comply with the property's vegetative buffer requirement.
Okay.
Works for me. Mr. Hacksby?
Yeah. that would
Okay.
Thank you for the suggestion.
Change
catch,
is
Bob.
to next.
Okay, page 2. I'm just a little confused here because we're using the term principal use in paragraph 2. And we're referring to the principal use definition going back to the old code.
On to approve the current.
Yeah, we did that, as I remember. Correct, if I remember correctly, we did that, Bob, just so that it was
Mr.
noted.
Hacksby?
It was so it was noted that it was previously approved use. Because they're in the code, it states it's not required if it's previously approved.
Yeah, what I was looking at is principal use is not really defined in this current code. They define principal building or structure and say that it's the main use of a lot. And that's in 21-14-040 in the definitions. And then and the accessories are only talked about in 21-05-040E, where it talks about referencing the accessory uses. So I'm a little concerned that we're using that phrase
From the old code.
from the old code.
Right, where's the new code section?
But-
Which is the new code section that it defines previously approved? I think it
That is 140. That's in 140.
Approved. There's another section of the first one too.
Any facility site selection review. Brings up a good point.
This
Mhm.
gives me some concern.
So,
It seems like the
is there
current.
any reference in the new code? There's got to be a reference to principal use and accessory use in the new code.
There is, but it's kind of convoluted.
Where is it? What's the step, what's the
It's
statutory?
21-14-040.
Okay.
In definitions, 2114-040. What are we looking, principal? And it says it's the main use. And then it doesn't talk about accessory uses until you go back in and look under,
Under educate, if I remember correctly, under educational institutions, it said accessory uses include. In the
there is one
code.
there, yeah, 2105-040.
Yeah, 21.05.040E specifically identifies recreational sports facilities as accessory uses and educational facilities, which includes high schools.
Right, but it doesn't get, and it talks accessory uses, it doesn't talk principal uses.
Why don't we
Just-
hack out, get rid of, which in 2001 identified educational institutions as a permitted use,
And if,
and eliminate principal.
well, just a second, let me throw one more thing in here. On the record at 249,
Okay.
they were talking, as a way to show the permitted facility is going to offer full compliance with ASD High School Educational Specifications Site Plan. Review, can't read it, can't read one right. Oh, yeah. Okay, specifications for the general site plan for high school. And that's, okay, that's also referenced at, record at 244. So it's talking, they're talking kind of the same thing, but they're not using that principal uses term.
Okay.
Like the old code does. So I was concerned that we may be causing.
Does the old code reference a permitted principal
Yes.
use?
Principal use.
Yes.
Well,
Yes,
then
it
her
does.
sentence is correct. It says, which in 2001 identified educational institutions as a permitted principal use. So
That's-
she's got it correct.
Okay.
This
but
is
then-
only relating back to 2001.
Okay, but if you drop down then and look at three, AMC 2103-140B1 identifies principal uses, not accessory uses, subject to the site selection process. See, we're using that same phrase, but 2103-140B doesn't use that phrase, does it?
It does not, and that was the board's interpretation of it, and.
Right, that was our discussion.
Yes.
Because we were
Yeah.
talking, okay, we're talking major facilities here. It's a principal use type major facility.
Yes.
And we were using the phrase to help describe, but we were not, I'm concerned that this looked like we're using
The old code
old
language.
code as the principal use definition.
I have brought up the new code, and under that definition section that you referenced, 2114-040, I found use, principal, any main activity permitted by this title.
Oh, where'd you find that?
It's under the same code section, and instead of calling it principal use, look under the word use. And it also
accessory.
has use
Under
except.
the definition section?
Yes.
Yes, in
Yes.
2114-040. And
In
it.
other words, it's indexed under use, accessory instead of accessory use.
Use principal. Oh, man, I didn't see that one.
Yeah.
I didn't
No,
see it
it's
before either,
illogical.
so I'm glad you brought that up.
It's illogical, but I think it covers it.
So-
Any main activity permitted by this time, okay.
It has,
There's your-
and it has accessory use too.
You know what, I think we probably, what about referencing that just as a cross-reference in that
Just-
piece, right? in
I
Just
can-
make a footnote.
Mhm.
Just
Yeah.
make a footnote there.
Referring back to use principle definition.
Do you want the footnote on number 3? Or where would you like the footnote
Well,
attached
my
to?
confusion occurred on number 3.
Okay.
We talked
Yes.
about principal
I
use
think
and
that's
using
where the
same
footnote
term.
should
Yeah.
go.
So what about a C, Anchorage Municipal Code 2114.040, definition of
040.
use, comma, principal.
Principal.
Right, right.
And do you want me to
Okay,
put
that-
in there too, use, comma, accessory as well?
I would.
Just like it says.
Okay,
Yes,
Use comma principal, use comma accessory.
that's 2103.
21.14.
14.040. It's the definition section.
Okay.
And I'm gonna put use, comma, principal and use, comma, accessory in quotes.
Yeah, I
Or
Or
think that,
parentheses or something like that, yes.
okay, that helps.
Yes, I think
Yep.
that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's
Yes.
a good catch. Anything else?
I was wondering if we could, if it might be worth it to rephrase number 5 just a little bit in the AMC 210504E. Classifies a high school as an educational facility and identifies recreational and sports facilities as accessory uses at educational facilities.
Hold it. So,
Would that-
following the
that
statutory
clarify?
reference, you want to add what now?
Instead of knock out specifically, it just says classifies a high school, quote unquote, as an educational facility and then keep the rest of it, identifies recreational and sports facilities as accessory uses.
All right,
at
just 1 second
educational-
here, we need to get this. Classifies a high school as a, quote, educational facility?
As an educational facility.
Or is it educational institution?
I think it's a facility, let me double check though. It's 25.
That would take us back to 2, is it an educational facility or an institution?
I think it's I'm pretty sure it's a facility, but let me, educational facility.
Okay, all right, so we would add.
It used to be called, under the old code, educational institution.
Okay, but
So
we're
we're
dealing
gonna-
with a new one. So.
Are we gonna interchange them?
Just 1 second here. The suggestion is to strike the word specifically and insert instead classifies a high school as a, quote, educational facility, unquote, and
I think that's I think
Yeah,
the
and a
suggestion
period after
clarifies.
facilities.
I think that
I mean,
clarifies.
we hit it twice, and so that there's no mistaking what we're saying.
no. What do you want to do now?
A
Come on.
period after the last educational facilities.
Oh, I see, and strike the words which includes high schools.
Mhm.
All right.
It's a little bit stronger.
I agree, I think that's a great improvement.
Any argument over that change?
No.
Mr. Hacksby?
None.
Acceptable to me. Done.
Okay.
Next.
Before you get off that subject, can I interrupt you one?
Yeah.
Just 1 second. Mr. Hacksby, we need to identify, you need to do this properly so that the record reflects who is speaking. Mr. Hacksby.
I agree with what you, exactly where you're coming from on that one, Bob. Now, the question is going to be, are we missing the tie? Is there going to be a missed tie between 2, educational institution, old code, new code, under, what was it, 5, educational facility?
No, I don't think so, because the old code very clearly spells out principal uses for educational institutions. Different wording.
Under high school.
Yes,
Yes.
it's different.
It's actually the educational institution is the top identifier in high schools under that, so, and I do think that keeping it in quotes helps distinguish between the two terms.
It's just, it's only a question. That's
No,
all.
I agree. I think there's proper separation here between old and new code.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Stewart,
on
further
that-
changes, suggestions, deletions?
Okay, on footnote 1, do we need to add the and AMC 2140-020 old Title 21 to clarify?
I think that's a good idea.
Old Title 21,
Is that what they call it?
yes, just Old Title 21.
Will you give me
It's
the
not
reference?
Title 20. It wasn't-
Give us the reference again, AMC.
2140-020.
That's the old code.
And would you like that old Title 21 or old code, how?
Well, wait a minute, we've called
Are we-
this old title, we called it, if you look at the second to the last whereas, we called it the new Title 21. So we call this the old Title 21.
Question.
Mr. Haxby?
It wasn't old Title 21, it was old code. The new code is Title 21. The old code wasn't Title
Yeah, it was.
20. Was it?
Yeah, of course. The same title.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, then I'm-
Yeah.
Title 21's the
Oh,
same.
yeah, it's still Title 21, it's just old versus new, Title 21.
And then you got that year transition period.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay. Back to Mr. Stewart. Anything else?
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Stewart, this is Council Kitchen, I wanna step in, is it okay if I put old Title 21 in parentheses there?
Why?
Or where would you like old Title 21 before or after AMC then?
No, we will put it ahead.
Okay,
There will be a semicolon after R 30-31,
Mhm.
semicolon, old Title 21, comma, AMC 2140-020.
okay,
Okay, that works.
thank you.
All right,
Long as
does that
it's-
work for
long as
you,
it's-
Mr. Haxby? Okay. Record should reflect that we adopt that change. Now, Mr. Stewart, next change.
That is all the changes I have.
Okay. Mr. Haxby, any further changes?
None.
I have nothing further. So I will entertain a motion that we accept the proposed decision concerning appeal number 2015-1 as changed here today.
I'll make a motion to
Approve has been moved to approve
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Stewart. Any discussion?
None.
Mr. Stewart? None. I have no further matter. Madam Clerk?
Barrett Goodjob,
Yes?
Robert Stewart,
Yes.
John Haxby.
Yes.
And the motion carries 3-0. And just in terms of procedure, Courtney, the way this should work is that you propose, make those necessary changes, and you simply email them to me, and I will print it out on white paper, and I will sign it and deliver it to the clerk's office.
I've made the changes now, do you want me
No.
to print it out?
Oh, that's fine.
Now?
Yes. if you
I don't know if
can.
I have access to a printer, if I email it to you, Lisa, or,
I can go up and print it.
okay,
Would you?
I'll email it to you right now,
Okay.
and then you can sign now.
Okay.